Today we're going to take these two vintage 70s mini bikes and get them back up and going so they can be enjoyed. So in the back right here we have a 1976 MX GT80, something like that. Little two-stroke, 80cc dirt bike, enduro type thing. Pretty small. I did resurrect these probably 5-6 years ago, and in doing so I put the blue fabric just as a, the guy wanted them for his kids just for Christmas or something, and I just had extra blue fabric vinyl seat laying around, so I just did a quick tuck and cover on that to cover up the horribleness. I only had so much black because I did the same with this. And up front we have a 1974 Honda MR50 50cc two-stroke little dirt bike. Peppy little thing. This thing's way quicker than the 80cc. At least it feels like it. You're lower, but also this thing weighs 75 pounds, or that thing probably weighs 150 pounds. So that thing's twice as heavy as this little thing. This thing will move. This is a 3-speed clutch. So 3-speed, 3-up. This one is a 4-speed clutch. So they've been sitting for 5 years or so since I last worked on them. We're going to go through them, get them back running again so they can be enjoyed. Just for size comparison, this is a CT70 Honda of the same era. This is my 1981, but they're all the same. You can see how big this bike looks compared to this thing. This is actually a ton of fun. I'm actually excited to get it up and going again for them, and so I can actually give it a spin around the block. Now we should be able to get more. Oh, we got spark. It's super weak. Spark is definitely not good enough. We're going to have to clean the points or something. I think I'm going to have to go through the carburetor as well. We'll pull it off just for the heck of it. Always got to pull off the carburetor. The fuel tank, I'm curious to see what's in there. I mean, look. It is rust free and completely dry in there. I don't hear anything sloshing. So, good. Flip the bike around. So now we're on the cover side. Kind of unique. The cover just pops on instead of being held on by screws. And should be able to access the points under this cover, or we can just take this all right off. Kind of neat. I actually forgot I made this. So I made this chain cover out of one piece of sheet metal because kids were going to ride it. I didn't want kids getting their toes chopped off, so I made up a sheet metal, pretty thin little, but did some cool bends. I'm impressed with it, which is a little chain cover. Impressed with my own work, where I completely forgot that I did. So let's get in here and I will see if I can access the points. Take off the cover, and then we're going to use this tool right here. Pretty cheap tool. I'll put a link below. It works for all these little Hondas. You can't get a puller around these things. This is the absolute only way to do it. That's reverse thread, if I recall. Screw this in. And the light will come off like nothing. Without this tool, you're going to break stuff. I see people all the time trying to take these things off. And there's going to be a little Woodruff key in here. Leave that right at the top. But now we can see all of our points, and we can clean our little points contacts. Here's our points right here. And there's the lobe, and that actually rides on the center of this to actually fire. So it actually doesn't look worn down. We'll just clean it up real fast and It should be good. Maybe put a drop of oil right on this little sponge that keeps the felt, keeps this lubricated. We'll check the spark timing as well, I guess. Usually I just use some fine sandpaper. Sometimes I use these little file things. I'm just letting them kind of close on themselves. I'm just cleaning in between them. Spray a little carburetor cleaner. Just acetone. And that just degreases them because they won't fire if there's grease on them. And then we'll blow them out with compressed air. I'll put a drop of bar and chain oil on here. This stuff has tacking agents in it, so it actually won't fling off everywhere, which I do not want it to fling off, just a little bit. And then we'll reinstall this. You can see my little key up here. And it's gonna pull right in. We'll put this back on it just to hold it. There it goes. So I got my spark gap tester hooked up because I want to see how well it jumps a gap, because that gives you an idea how strong the spark is. Generally, under compression, the air is more dense, so the spark has a lot harder time jumping. So that's why spark plug gaps are so close. But out in the open air, that same spark plug should jump something, you know, 4 or 5 times bigger. So we got this hooked up. And it's having no problem jumping that gap, which is probably about 3 times, 4 times bigger than the spark plug gap. Let's widen it out even further. See if we can get it to jump even further. Yep, it's jumping it. So we're good. Let's we can clean up the spark plug with the torch real fast. And then I'm just going to pull up the carburetor and take a look at it and see if we can just get it going. This works a treat. That's how you actually just heat it up with a good blowtorch real fast to red. Try to get that insulator in there, and it will actually clean the spark plug, defoul it, especially on 2-stroke engines, and it works just as good and for just as long as a brand new plug. So now I need to check the timing of the points to make sure they're opening at the right point. The gap isn't as crucial. The gap kind of just puts you in the same point of when it's firing. These rely completely on when it's opening and closing to trigger the spark. Here I have a T for top dead center. Here I have an F for fire. So here's the gap there, or the little spot on the case that you can see. So that's exactly top dead center. That's when it should fire. So what I do is I'm just checking continuity between my 2 leads. And so I just have one grounded, and I have the wire coming off of the points right here. And you can see I have 1.5 down here. But as soon as the points close and touch, I'll move this real slow. It should jump down to 0.2, like essentially nothing right there. And that's dead on where my fire is. So that's right when they close. So I check that a couple times. 0.2 and boom. So don't even look up here, just look down here. And I just rotate it till it hits and it's dead on. And if that's not, you can actually adjust the points open further or close them a little bit more, and that'll trigger exactly when it fires. If you want old fuel lines just to come right off and just be nice and pliable, heat gun. If you're working on these old Japanese bikes, it's an absolute must. You have to buy a JAS Phillips screwdriver. These are not Phillips screws. They strip out effortlessly unless you buy a JAS screwdriver. There we go. A little different. It doesn't have the screw-in throttle. Actually has this plate with a little choke knob on top. What is this? Keyhin? It's nice and sticky. Not good. Yeah, it's a Keyhin. Yeah, good thing I took that off. It's just full of... The problem with these two strokes is the oil just... The gas evaporates and just leaves oil behind, and it just keeps getting worse and worse, and everything just gums up and gets super sticky with oil. So, well, I'll just take this carburetor apart. These JAS screwdrivers, serious, I think they work better than Phillips on USA Phillips. If you got a screw that you think is going to strip out, get a JAS, and it just grabs way better, has way more bite. These carb, if you've ever taken one of these apart from some little Honda or similar, you know what I'm talking about. They all just seem to like strip out, so you just automatically assume they're just made out of super low end material. Yeah, look at that. That was spotless a couple years ago, but you just let it sit, and that's 4 years, 5 years, just turns into nastiness. Ethanol fuel. Just after a couple years, that's what ethanol fuel does. If they would have used ethanol free like I told them, we probably wouldn't be having these issues. All nice and clean. All the passages. The idle jet was clogged pretty severely. The main jet was clogged, but the idle jet was really clogged. So now it's just a matter of reassembling it. This is, I'm not using a rebuild kit. I rarely use rebuild kits because as long as the carb's clean, it's good. I do need to resell the bowl. The original O-ring is probably a little dry. So what I use, about the only thing you can use to do this is not gasket maker, but you use #2 gasket sealant. That comes in, Permatex makes one. This is by Versacam, a USA company, but they make 1 and 2. 1 is a hardening. 2 is it always stays like rubber, and it's one of the only things that is fuel resistant, and it cleans off easily. But I'll just put a little dab around there. And they also make a #3, which is like in a jar, which is kind of liquid. At least Permatex does. It's the exact same thing. It's just in a jar versus this. But this never sets up. This is made for the aviation industry. But I just take a little bit. It's not rubbery. Like, I mean, it sets up rubbery, but it's not like gasket maker. This is just gasket sealant. So this is the same stuff. This is what you would put on a paper gasket, because you're never supposed to put, you know, that form a gasket, you know, gasket maker stuff. You're never supposed to use that on a paper gasket. You're supposed to use one or the other. But this stuff you actually use on a paper gasket, and it actually just holds it in place. It's like a tacking agent. It fills in minor imperfections, but it'll just hold the stuff in place while you move it around. So now I will just make sure I'll clean that up a little bit. But I'll put this back together, and we'll be able to slide her back in and fire her up. Let's see if we can get her to fire anyway. I'll move on to the next bike. I need to put some air in these tires. A little flat. Bike #2. This is a 1976 Yamaha 80 GT MXC, something like that. GT MXC. That's what I have written on here. That's what I researched years ago. Not exactly sure, but somewhere in there. 76 Yamaha 2-stroke 80. This one's a little bit different design. This one's about the same size as a Honda CT70. The tires are just a lot bigger. But you kind of sit around it a little bit more. This is more designed kind of as like an enduro, an off-road, on-road kind of bike. This one's just so much heavier, and even though it's an 80cc versus the 50cc, this one just feels like it has a lot less power compared to that Honda. Just, I mean, you're moving. I mean, the Honda has to weigh like 75 pounds. This thing has to weigh 150 pounds. The Honda is just a pre-mix. You mix the two-stroke and the gas tank. You mix that together. This one actually had oil injection, but when I worked on this 6 years ago, I just disconnected it. I didn't really want to deal with figuring out if it worked or not. It was just easier just to bypass the lines and just mix the gas and put it in the tank, just like the other one, and they could ride together. So let's check for spark on this one as well, and see if where we need to go from there. If we need to touch the points or anything on this thing. If we can go straight to the carburetor, we'll just rebuild the carburetor on this one real fast as well. Let's set that there, and you guys tell me if you see a spark. Let's turn off this light. I can't see. I can hear it. Let's see if I can see it. Oh yeah. Fabulous spark. Okay, so we don't have to touch anything on the points on this one. Spark is still great. I will probably still clean this, just defoul it, just in case while it's already out. But I remember this carb being a pain in the butt, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it was easier than I remember. It's barely holding on. Yeah, so when I rebuilt these years ago, the guy brought them to me. He had just bought them off of classifieds, and essentially was just giving them to his boys for Christmas, and he just didn't want them to look like garbage, you know, because they had been sitting for who knows how long before I touched them. It looked like they've been sitting for at least 10 plus years, 10, 15 years, you know, before I touched them last time. So they just looked like horrible. The seats were all ripped up, so I just had a piece of blue vinyl that I put this blue vinyl on this one, and I put the black vinyl. I didn't have enough to do all black, but I put the black vinyl on the Honda because I like the Honda a little bit more, and the blue vinyl here on the Yamaha. And that should be about it. We'll put the fuel line is just super crusty, so we'll throw the heat gun on it, and it'll soften right up, and it'll pop right off like it's brand new. And then we'll throw the heat gun on those boots a little bit, and they should soften up, and everything should just slide right off. Let the whole gas tank up and off. The whole thing want to come off? Yep, the whole boot wants to come off. I think I remember that too. And we'll have to put that on. This carburetor actually wasn't too bad. The idle jet was clogged, but I was able just to clear it out. All the passengers are clean. The outside's still a little ugly because the paint's flaking off, but it should run good. We can put it back together and put some gas in it, and we'll see if we can get this thing to fire. Fuel tank isn't bad. It was completely empty as well. There's a little bit of rust in there. I know it's hard to see, but there's a little bit of surface rust, but nothing bad. So we'll just, and it's completely dry. So we'll just fill this one up and hook it up and fire it up. Okay. Put it on run, push the choke down, and let's see. See if I can start this by hand.